Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my homeowner association president trespassed on my property and claimed that my pond violated the HOA bylaws. He ended up filling my pond with sand and destroyed my garden. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. The first one starts like this. I am an avid gardener and turned most of my backyard into my own little personal flower land. I take time out of every single day to either water or tend to them. Even if they don't need anything, I enjoy being out in my yard and looking at the beauty. I'm no decorator, but I feel the way they are planted leads to some nice color patterns. Like a lot of people looking at something you love, I felt like there was always something missing to make my backyard just perfect. Well, when I turned 40, I decided to spoil myself and pay for that one missing piece, which was a pond. It was not huge or fancy, but I felt like it really tied everything together and made my garden look amazing. It was small and a pump system let there be a small waterfall that I really enjoyed. It provided almost a white noise that made sitting outside with the flowers even better. The problem came a few weeks after the pond was finished when the HOA president came knocking on my door. I had never actually met him before or knew who he was. I think that made him like me even less. Me, hello? HOA president, I'm here about the pond. Me, are you from the construction company? Did you leave something in my yard? HOA president, I'm the head of the HOA that you signed into. Me, oh, well, it's nice to meet you. Did you want to see the pond or something? HOA president, I've seen it and I'm here to tell you to get rid of it right now. It violates the bylaws and I can give you so many fines for it, you'll be in debt for the rest of your life. I can even make it so you get foreclosed on. I have no idea why he came at me this aggressively about something that seemed so minor. Also, I was paying attention to his words, as when he said he already saw the pond, that raised a red flag. You cannot see it from the street or even just walking up to my front door. It was in the back, which meant he walked around my property without my consent. I knew that I was in the HOA, but getting my pond built required several steps. The first of which getting the building approval, which I was able to get with no issues. Since this HOA is mandatory, that means nothing against HOA rules could get approved in the first place. Still, I was going to look more into the rules before I said anything for certain. I had a bad feeling and told him to please send me a letter in the mail directly stating the issue and what rules my pond is breaking. As soon as he left, I went online and found the extensive HOA guide that all homeowners need to follow. I was glad for an online version because I could just search for the keywords like building, ponds, structures, etc. There was nothing that said ponds were not allowed, so I really didn't know what he was going off about. There was a rule about no in-ground pools, but this thing was nowhere close to the size or depth to be considered a pool. I did get a letter though, and it was just as vague, claiming that I was violating HOA rules with my newest structure and I had to remove it. Since I was not getting sent any kind of fine or told what rule I broke, I was not gonna destroy my pond. I started getting harassing calls from him stating he saw my pond was still there and he was telling me to get rid of it. He was getting on my nerves, so I told him that if it was against the rules to fine me for it, and then I could really see what rule I was breaking. However, no fines were coming in the mail and I figured it was because there was no way one would get approved for breaking a rule that didn't exist. Instead, he decided he was going to personally do something about my pond. I still don't know why it seemed to almost offend him. And well, it was not a pretty sight when I came home from work one day and wanted to go relax in my garden. The pond was no longer running the waterfall, and instead the pond was filled to the brim with sand. All of my flowers were either stepped on or plucked right out of the ground, with sand covering that entire area as well. I was actually on the ground sobbing until somebody heard and came back to check on me, thinking I might have been hurt. A few people in the neighborhood know about my garden as well and love it when they are invited and come see it too. So when they saw what happened to it, they were shocked and wanted to know who was responsible for this. I knew that it had to be the HOA president, but I did not have any kind of proof to show that aside from his harassment to get rid of the pond. That might have been enough to take him to court, but I worried it would not be enough to win. The couple living behind me peeked over the fence and also saw the destruction and me crying. They told me they had cameras and while it might not show everything, it might have caught something that I could use. They sent it to me and I saw the face of the HOA president and him holding a large bag of presumably sand. That was enough for me to go ahead and sue him for destroying my garden, my pond, and trespassing on my property. We even threw in harassment charges just to really make sure that he got nailed with something. The video and constant harassment was enough for him to be found guilty. He was sent behind bars for destruction of property and owing me a ton of money to repair my land, my pond, and starting to regrow my garden. They also nailed him for fraud since he was embezzling HOA funds and siphoning off money into his own pockets. It was gonna be a slow process, but I would get my garden back to its glory eventually. With him gone, I was concerned about who might take his place and what horror they could do to somebody else. So that was what made me decide to try and run for HOA president myself. I used my story to explain why I wanted the position and would put more of an emphasis on helping people rather than hurting them, as well as letting them know that if I found anybody in a position of power within the HOA abusing it, I would make sure they lost their position. People liked my honesty, and when it came time for the vote, I won by a pretty good margin too. One thing that I want to do with my new position is allocate some money to making empty areas in the neighborhood useful. With community feedback, of course, so everybody can get a say in what happened since it was their money after all. I want to show people what a good HOA can actually do, so maybe there can be stories about good ones that help instead of more like mine where they cause destruction. And yeah, ripe stars, let's hope that OP stays true to his word and makes the world a better place by actually being a good HOA president. Either way, the next one is a petty revenge story. Over the years, my father became increasingly impaired by strokes. His mind was still sharp and he lived alone, but his world got smaller and smaller. I was his primary support. To my family, young and old, I constantly reminded them how much letters, cards, thank you notes, and best of all, visits mattered to him. He was not a drag to be around, everyone got a gift, usually money, from him for every occasion. He lived in a beach resort, so it was hardly a hardship to visit him. He left his money in a trust and I am in charge of the assets. My father saved every note, collected all the letters, and he wrote about every visit in his journal. Last week I sat down and tallied it all up. Today I am mailing checks to all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. $1,000 for every note, $2,000 for every visit, and $3,000 per day for anyone who took him on an outing overnight. And to further emphasize that I'm being petty, the two people who should get nothing under my formula are going to get $500 each just so they know they are not overlooked. A 14-year-old great niece is getting over $100K because she rode her bike over every week and did his yard, etc. The feathers will be flying when the envelopes are opened. And yeah, ripe stars, if you also enjoy these petty revenge stories, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much, and the next one is another petty revenge story. Background: about 25 years ago, I registered my last name .com for my personal use. I mostly use it as an email server for my family. Unfortunately, there are many businesses around the world that use my last name, their country code, for their websites and email. As such, I regularly get business mail sent to my server. Most of the time this just bounces, but sometimes they happen to match the name of a user or former user of my mail server. As all of the companies have been polite so far, I routinely forward business-related email to the correct address. Because it doesn't really cost me anything, I have set up personal email addresses for some people I don't actually know who happen to have my last name as long as they agreed not to use it for spam. Well then, 20 years ago, there was this one guy who happened to have the same first name as my deceased uncle. I was monitoring that address just in case anything important legally or financially came through to make sure that his family didn't get surprised by anything. The guy who decided to use that for his address had a serious gambling problem. I was getting emails from several gambling sites, often multiple times per day, with transaction records for large, at least from my perspective, deposits. These were all credit card transactions, very often for offshore online casinos, so they did not exactly abide by banking regulations either in the US or his home country. In other words, I often got the full credit card numbers and expiration dates emailed unencrypted. If I'd been dishonest, I could have easily run up thousands of dollars in charges. Because some of these transactions also had his physical address, I did have a way to contact him. So first, by using that, I was able to figure out what his actual personal email address was. I did not want to use his company email because of the nature of what I was sending, so I emailed him and explained the problem and asked him if he was really comfortable with me having access to several of his credit cards. He accused me of being a hacker, called me several names that I shouldn't repeat here, and blew me off because I kept getting the email receipts. At this point, I figured out that he was probably digging himself and his family into a fairly deep financial hole, and while I was annoyed with him for ignoring his problem and being rude, I did not think that his family should pay the price for his bad gambling habit. Because I had his home address, I was able to figure out his wife's name and where she worked. So I printed up a stack of about 20 of the emails, put them into an envelope marked personal and confidential, and dropped them in the mail to her office. A couple of weeks later, the gambling emails stopped, and a few months after that, out of curiosity, I did a search for them again and found the legal notice for their divorce. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. So somewhere around 2007, I was working as a drugstore manager. I was running the entire front store and the pharmacy. Pay was excellent for someone who was in their early to mid-20s, but the job was also soul-crushing in some stupid ways. A rule came down that cashiers can no longer have drinks at the register. They can drink on their lunch breaks and otherwise shouldn't need water. At the same time, they dialed back the AC, so the store was constantly uncomfortably warm, but not technically dangerous. I had some of the best staff. One lady was roughly 65 and came to me to let me know that she was on medicine that gave her dry mouth, so she needed me to know if I took her water away, she would really have a hard time being able to talk to customers. She almost developed a lisp when she couldn't have her water. I told her, no worries, have your water, I will deal with my boss when he sees you someday. Because he was running 40 stores and mine was generally not a problem store, he only came by every 60 days or so. Eventually, he does swing in and ask her about her water. She says I have a medical condition and I told her it was fine. I also told him that I had approved the water. He pulls me into the office to let me know that for her to have that water, she need a doctor's note. If he sees her with it again without a note, we both get written warnings. He explains this is because not following the company rule cannot be a decision made by me. I'm flabbergasted, I'm just a manager in charge of the store. This company literally made me do drills on how to deal with bombs or shootings, but I cannot approve a bottle of water. It must be an exception, deemed necessary for medical needs. I explain this is stupid, he actually agrees, but says he's also following orders from above. Great. So I pull my cashier aside and tell her what's up. I then said I'm really sorry, but can she please just get her doctor to fax a stupid note over so we can cover our assets? She got a little gleam in her eye and I was excited to see what it meant. Her next shift she rolls in and says, "You're gonna love this." She hands me about 100 copies of a letter that says something along the lines of, "I do solemnly state that cashier is medically a human being and requires water on regular intervals while working and not solely during breaks. This was a massive waste of time and your company should be ashamed of yourself. I'll be recommending your competitor as much as humanly possible to my patients who fill prescriptions in this town for the rest of my natural life. Dr. XYZ. The next 40 were identical letters, each with a different staff member, listed as my genius cashier has snagged an old schedule with first names and last initials. The rest had a blank space for me to fill in new hire names so our staff could have all the drinks on the sales floor. My boss was not even mad, none of the higher-ups above him ever mentioned it on a store walk, so I assume it was covered in a meeting of people higher up than me. And yeah, ripe stars, I gotta say, props to that cashier and OP, they are absolute legends. But honestly, I'm so happy that I don't have to work in an environment like this. Absolutely toxic. Either way, the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. Am I the a-hole for not eating with my wife? So I'm sitting here half annoyed, half confused how to feel. Here's my situation. My wife did not work today, she has been hanging with the kids all day. I got home from work at 5:30 and did a turn and burn to jiu-jitsu class. Dinner was not discussed, but since I was getting home at 8:30 I assumed I was on my own for dinner. I get back at 8:30, absolutely starving and exhausted. I'd been planning my dinner all day. Poor man's sushi, it's just canned tuna, rice wrapped in seaweed. I write down everything I eat in a food log and had planned this dinner in advance. I had the exact amount of rice and only 2 sheets of seaweed. I get home and my wife and kids are in the bathroom, taking a bath, so I get to work on my sushi. I have the entire thing written down and I'm ready to feast. I'm giddy with excitement sitting down at the table. All of a sudden, my wife comes out and into the kitchen and says, "Can I have half of that?" Me and the kids went out for a late lunch and I haven't eaten. I pause, obviously not happy with this news. I don't want to share, but I also acknowledge that hogging down all the food would be selfish. So she notices the pause and goes, "Fine, I guess, I'll just figure something out," in a pissy tone. I go, no, we can split it, and I give her half. I go on to explain my situation, but I don't think she cared. She was annoyed that I even paused. Now I only had half my dinner and I'm still hungry. I cannot imagine asking for half of someone's food as they are just sitting down to eat. But I also cannot imagine not sharing it. I cannot decide how to feel, that's the story. So, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you feel like OP is the a-hole or not? Comment number 1 said, "You are the a-hole. Not for the food thing, everyone sucks here. Both people have a right to feel annoyed at that situation and I hope you work out shared responsibilities for food in the household if needed. However, what the heck did the kids have for dinner?" But back to my point, you're the a-hole for talking about her day like spending it with the kids is just leisure time. It sounds like she was kept just as busy as you and you only got a break in her day after giving the kids a bath. She sounded desperate and likely needed that food just as much as you did. I hope you can try to see the situation from her perspective. Comment number 2, everyone sucks here. You're a family with kids and should be communicating about who's responsible for dinner so that this sort of thing doesn't happen. Comment number 3, you're the a-hole. How do you have children with this woman and not have learned to communicate or have a plan in place for days like this? I'm assuming this nearly 3-hour-long class is not a spur-of-the-minute thing. If it's weekly or monthly or whatever, how is there not an SOP between you and your wife for how dinner is handled those nights? You have a food journal where you write down every meal in advance, but you cannot make a plan with your wife? In lieu of a plan, how about even an ounce of communication? "Hey wife, since I have class until 8:30, should I assume I'm on my own for dinner or do I need to pick something up for the family?" How about a text earlier in the day saying that you're looking forward to this solo meal? You could just say, "Hey honey, I just got home and making my sushi. Did you have dinner? Or can I make you something too since you're bathing our children?" Also, at no point do you mention speaking to your wife until she approached you in the kitchen. Dude, talk to your wife. And yeah, ripe stars, I feel like that's the crux with a lot of these Am I the A-hole stories. A lot of these situations could simply be resolved if people just talk to each other. But it seems like communication problems are really one of the biggest things in relationships. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Want to ruin kids' fun time? Okay, good luck using that luxury car. This is a friend of mine's experience that I think belongs here at least 15 years ago. A little background, my friend lives in a gated community. He is on the HOA board since he is in construction and handles the community's needs if needed. The houses there range from comfy, read middle class, to I have too much money. I am talking see-through infinity pools so you can see butts at eye level, fully equipped 4 or 5 car garages, a 2-bed space for the maid and of course seating areas suspiciously convenient for doing drugs. These houses are usually located by themselves, no neighbors, at a cul-de-sac. This means the road is usually free of traffic and pretty safe for children to play, which is exactly what kids did once summer or any other holiday came along. They would ride bikes, race and do other kid stuff. A couple lived at one of these houses, let's call them Mr. Cul-de-Nutsack NS and Mrs. Cul-de-Nutsucker NSKR. They were grade A fruitcakes. They would throw parties every weekend. It almost always resulted in crap being thrown on the street, burnt rubber from cars smoking their tires and so on. The HOA cited them many a times, but they would just pay the fines and carry on. NS and NSKR never liked kids playing in front of their house, no idea why. It's not like they could hear the kids since the front lawn was pretty expensive and they had a gate. So Mr. and Mrs. NS would witch to the HOA citing kid safety and my friend would go talk to them. Keep in mind that my friend is a homeowner too. It would go like this. Friend, I am here to talk to you about the complaint. NS,
when is the damn HOA going to take care of it?
Friend, I actually want to discuss the issue and maybe we can find another solution.
Just do it, okay?
Friend, but we cannot ask parents to stop their kids from playing and we cannot stop kids from playing on the street since it is the safest area they can play in, while being close to their own houses.
It is not safe for them to be playing out there. What if I hit a kid? I don't want the liability, so you just take care of it, okay?
Friend, NS.
Think of it as kid safety.
Friend, Friend, I'm sorry, we just cannot do it. Even if we did, we cannot enforce it.
I will be speaking to the HOA's president.
Friend says goodbye and leaves. They would calm down for a few weeks and then complain again. Nothing would change their mind about complaining and demanding the kids be banned from playing. Finally, after a year of this, the HOA caved in and decided to put out a rule that kids are not supposed to ride bikes on the roads for safety reasons. Enter my friend, let's call him F, and his malicious compliance. F knew NS had an expensive car that he loved to show off. This car rode really low, think 3 to 4 inches, probably measured by the way, with his genitals. F convinced the HOA that the rule would never stick and the only option was to install speed humps, speed breakers, speed cushions, traffic calming devices, slow your roll broski devices on the left and right sides of the cul-de-sac part where NS's gate started. The maximum allowed speed hump height by law is 4 inches, not verified. Guess which ones F decided to install? The HOA still received complaints from NS, only now the complaints are about the speed humps catching the bottom of his favorite car. NS wants them removed and says it is damaging his cars and the cars of people who drive to his house for the weekend parties. The HOA responds and says, "We cannot do it in the interest of kids' safety." Read, think of it as kids' safety, F-face. NS had to drive his low-riding cars diagonally. Kids still played between the speed humps, using them as boundaries for their games. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.